So I'm really glad to see everybody here, and I'm excited. And it's good to hear from a banker about what they see happening in Montgomery County, because that's important. I know it's important to all of you, but it's important to everybody in the county. How well the business sector does actually makes a difference in terms of how well the county does. I mean, the revenues that you all generate are revenues we use to try to do good things with. And so we do have a symbiotic relationship, and we've been working hard to build that. I'm excited to be here because when I got elected and we had just lost Amazon, I thought about White Flint and I said, it's still White Flint. It's still got the potential to be developed into something. And if it's not Amazon, we ought to be focusing on Montgomery County's two strengths, which are life sciences and computing, and try to make this a center for that. And I had talked to people, had talked to 1776, and why weren't you in Montgomery County? And they said, there's no there. And so we had discussions about what a there would have to be that would make people more interested in being here. We talked with people in the biotech industry about, what they were interested in, and, had interesting conversations why people would go to Boston and pay more to be in Boston than they would pay to get into Montgomery County and have the same thing and have the same buildings. And a lot of it had to do with placemaking and where they were. It made me think more and more about White Flint, because here's a place where you could actually replicate a Kendall Square if you wanted to replicate a Kendall Square. Hard to do that in an office park. A lot easier to do it around the metro. So I started working with WMATA and spent a year just getting to the point we could have an agreement to agree to try to produce a joint development agreement for the White Flint Metro that would focus on the life sciences industry and computing to try to make that the center of it. And I've talked with property owners, large and small here, about bringing other life sciences companies here, and there's a lot of interest, and some of the owners have confirmed that they're actually getting bites from the life science industry to come here. So I think we're going to be able to make this place take off. And frankly, if this takes off and we get a signature development in Montgomery County, we don't have signature developments like Fairfax does. Bethesda is not a signature development. It's big, it's important, but it's not a shiny gold object. And Fairfax has managed to pull off some shiny gold objects. We've got to figure out how do we compete in that space, and how do we build something that people say is a statement, not just offices to be occupied, but a statement about the county itself. And so I think this is a prime location for this. It's the biggest undeveloped metro site we have in the county. It's an enormous opportunity to do things here. So I'm excited. That's why I'm excited to be here. I've worked, for 2 years to try to get this thing to take off. WMATA's working with JLL. They should have their market study done by sometime in the fall. We're working with JLL on a comparative tax structure study between Montgomery County and competition in Virginia and DC. Spoiler alert, Montgomery County is the cheapest place if you look at property taxes. We may be one of the more difficult places to deal with, which is an internal problem, but we have lost where we've been the highest bidder. And so what I've been focused on, if you're losing when you're the highest bidder, why are you losing? It's not because we haven't put money on the table. A lot of time it's because internal issues here or reputational issues. So we've worked really hard to change the permitting department. People who have experienced it, I know in the life sciences, we've been able to get projects turned around really, really quickly. I know that the new approach to working with developers in advance, doing design meetings, clearing out problems before you go and build, dealing with inspectors who could come out to your site, and as they're inspecting, they find the first thing wrong, and then they fail you, and they'll come back when you fix that, and then they continue the inspection until they find the next thing that fails you, and it drags on and on and on. That stuff's not going to be happening. There's going to try to resolve these things in the field. We're not going to have inspectors overruling approved drawings, which has been a problem where somebody decides I don't like it, and if it's gone through an engineer, an inspector shouldn't be able to reverse it. So we're trying to deal with the reputational things that we know are problematic to people. We've made major changes in the way we do procurement. It's much more transparent. I never thought I'd see the day when the chamber would give an award to our procurement director, but they did. There's a significant change in the way we're approaching doing business. We preference Montgomery County businesses now, particularly smaller businesses. Will pay more for a contract with the Montgomery County small business because their money stays here. and it multiplies here. If I give a contract to Montgomery County business, I collect their rent or their property taxes. I collect probably their employee taxes. If that's a Virginia company or a Pennsylvania company, I don't see that money. And so the multiplier effect, which everybody sells us on when they're telling me why we should approve a new development, applies to where we do our contracting. And there's a multiplier effect when you spend locally. And so we're more focused on local spend, and we've actually had a 20% increase in local spend this year. So we're going to continue to push working with local Montgomery County businesses to move forward. This is an amazing event. I haven't been to an event this large in 18 months. It's remarkable. This has not been an easy year for Montgomery County, but if it's any comfort, we are the most vaccinated place in the United States of a jurisdiction over 300,000. We didn't get that way by accident. In the spring, when we were watching things explode in the early part of the spring, I took the New York Times Daily Tracker and I put in all the jurisdictions over 700,000. Montgomery County had the lowest case rates of any jurisdiction over 700,000 east of the Mississippi River. That didn't happen by accident. I made a decision when this hit that we were going to prioritize human life. I know for some of the businesses that was a hard decision. I'm fully aware of that. That's why from the very beginning I harped on the governor and on the federal folks to provide as much assistance to local businesses as you possibly could, because they were the collateral damage. We're used to hearing that as a war expression. You could think about in the war against COVID, small businesses were often the collateral damage. We took away their customers. And I feel pretty strongly that the federal government ought to be willing to put a substantial money back into the business community to help people recover from that. They didn't close because they did anything wrong. They closed because we were trying to make people safe. But we did make people safe. And we learned the first time we diverged from the governor's path that diverging from the governor's path kept people safer. Every time the case rate spiked in the state of Maryland, ours did not follow the governor's spike. We kept people healthier here. We were better able to protect people. That meant we could recover faster. People were projecting that the county government would have this massive deficit. I remember, certain blogger was, predicting doom and gloom, and the council was predicting the end of the universe. And we just, we looked at this and we realized that this was not the 2009 recession. This was not a failure of the fundamentals of the economic system or the business structure. It was a disease. And the disease tanked businesses. Businesses lost revenue. We would lose tax revenue. But there was nothing fundamentally unsound about the economy. It was just a crippled economy. And so sure enough, between the federal assistance and that $600 of, frankly, taxable income on the unemployment that the feds put out meant that we would not see the hit on revenues that we had seen in the 2009 recession. If you put it in perspective, Maryland's average unemployment check was $430 a week. Add 600 to it. That's a radically different income. It helped people stay and pay their bills. That was important. And it provided tax revenues we didn't think we would get. So we managed to weather this better than we thought. The federal assistance certainly was important. Montgomery County is no different than anybody else in the country. Without that federal assistance, we'd all be in deep trouble now. And you can bet how much many of us were hoping and contributing money to Georgia to make sure that we got the Senate seats we needed so we could pass a relief bill that the country needed. Could you imagine what would happen if that relief had not been put out? And where we would be right now, not just Montgomery County, but the whole country, where you would be if that money hadn't been put into pockets of Americans who basically spend it. When we gave our unemployment checks the boost, that money all went right back into the community. It went into the stores, the grocery stores, it went to pay rents. So this is a great example of where government spending actually directly boosts the economy. So I'm excited about that. So we're in a reasonably good shape. I'm pretty optimistic going forward. I'm optimistic about the changing business climate. I met earlier with, got in the beginning with the state of Maryland and the S group that was very, very much into the lab space and science space in the Shady Grove area. They were talking about the lack of wet lab space in Montgomery County and what we were going to do about it. In the last month, we've announced construction on about 3 million square feet of wet lab space. Industry is coming back here. People are coming here because they want to be here, and if we take advantage of it and we build this place out right and we put the infrastructure in place, we're going to be able to move forward. We're continuing to look at our tax structure. I'm very much interested in changing the way we tax development in the sense of, Virginia doesn't have impact taxes, but they have development districts. Development districts have let Virginia build infrastructure over the long period of time. I met with Jeff McKay, who's on the board there, and I talked to Sharon Bulova before that. Their ability to use development districts enabled them to build extension of metro, to build BRT systems, and to build capital projects. I can't bond against impact taxes. And to be honest with you, your impact taxes don't go anywhere that you necessarily want them to go, because your money goes into a pile, because it's not enough to build a project. If you pay me an impact tax, it's not enough to build a school, it's not enough to build the BRT system. It's money that goes into a pile and then gets spent on the first available project. In Virginia, when you do the taxing districts, whatever you're taxed for winds up being reinvested into the place where you're building. So you may pay as much or more money, and frankly, you pay more in Virginia in those taxes, but you get parks, you get transportation, you get infrastructure. In Montgomery County, you pay money and you get nothing. I understand that. And, we've lived with this for a very long time. It's time to change. And so we're going to be making proposals to move toward a more development district type structure. I'm even interested in entertaining TIFs, because there are changes in TIF regulations that make them more flexible. They used to be forbidden in Montgomery County. They're not going to be forbidden anymore. So we're going to change the way we do business. We're going to change the way we build infrastructure. Infrastructure still continues to be our leading problem. The business community has said over and over again that the lack of transportation in this county is an impediment to growth in this county. And every time I talk to I don't see him here today, but I won't say who he is. Every time I talk to one of the large property owners, the first question they ask me is, when are you going to put BRT up and down the pike? Because we need it. And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't have any tax base that I can actually float a bond against and build it. So we need different ways of doing things. I'm interested in doing that. I want to make sure this place thrives. I'm happy to be presiding over what I think is going to be a renaissance of Montgomery County's business community. I don't think anybody expected me to be in a position to do this or to be interested in doing this, but I absolutely understand the connection between your success and the success of this county.